What happens to you after death? Is there life after death? Is our soul immortal? Is there an eternal dimension to our destiny? Welcome, Swagatham, Vanakkam. The questions I have just listed have always had a place in human consciousness. But for our hypothetical interest in eternal life, or our curiosity as to what happens to us after we are dead, perhaps there would not have been religion at all in this world. Two things that constitute the cornerstones of all religions. One is the feeling that there is something seriously wrong with our earthly existence, which we really have otherwise no means to understand adequately. The second is the desire that our life should not end with our physical cessation upon this earth, and that it should continue beyond the door of death. So, on the one hand, the doctrine of sin, and on the other hand, the doctrine of immortality. These are the two legs on which religion walks. It would have variations as you go from one religion to another, but these two elements are found one way or another, in one form or another, in all religions, and there is no religion which is totally free from these two concerns. And human beings have always wondered as to what happens to them after their death. So I assume that this question is of universal interest, and therefore it's worth our while to set apart a little time to think about it. It's not an easy subject to deal with, but these are subjects that cannot be dodged simply because they're difficult. Now, we can only make a beginning to our thinking, and that's the limited scope of the present attempt. All of us would like to believe that there is some form of existence after death. In other words, we would like to believe that we are not like bubbles that just come up, burst, and disappear, leaving nothing behind, as though nothing has existed before the burst took place. That's not a very pleasant prospect for us to entertain or to accept. So then, what are we to make of this? Why does this intuition exist? Now, one of the arguments always used in support of the belief that there is life after death is the argument that if there is a desire, there is a corresponding object to it. For example, if you have thirst, there is water. If there is ambition, there is a world corresponding to it in which the ambition can be fulfilled if one tries to work hard enough. If there is a desire for health, there is a provision corresponding to it to meet health needs, so on and so forth. So, as a matter of generalization, one could say, and which has been said, I am not the first to say this, if there is a desire, there is some reality corresponding to it which is relevant to that desire in some form or the other. Every desire pertaining to whatever exists on the earth may be determinate, that is to say, we can fix it in terms of one-to-one correspondence, but a desire that corresponds to what exists beyond the world may be indeterminate. That is to say, it may be vague, not very precise, not very discrete, not very concrete. So that is something that needs to be kept as a margin for our thinking. That is, there's a difference in how we experience the desire pertaining to things terrestrial, things physical, things empirical, and how we experience the idea of eternal life. Any thinking regarding life after death will necessarily be enveloped in uncertainty, vagueness, because the kind of one-to-one correspondence that we may experience in regard to thinking on anything empirical, anything worldly, anything terrestrial, cannot be expected in this line of thinking. So this is again a margin to be kept. There's something that we have to accept. Quite obviously, whether or not there is eternal life cannot be proved in the laboratory of a scientist. So the scientific approach in the precise empirical hypothesis, experimentation, observation of data, proof, disproof, that scientific method obviously is not applicable here. So we have to adopt a different method. Now, having sort of fixed something of a background or something of a framework for our thinking, let me ask the question, why do people want to have eternal life? Or to put it in a rather funny manner, are people really sincere when they say that they crave or they wish for eternal life? Are they really sincere? There are two problems here. One is, how can you really sincerely desire that about which you really have no clear idea? As I said a short while ago, anything related to life after death has to be in a state of vagueness. The fact that you feel very strongly about it subjectively doesn't mean that your understanding of it is clear. Your feeling may be clear, but your understanding may not be clear. So, what you don't understand clearly, what remains in the twilight zone of your understanding, cannot really be, in honesty, said to be intensely and sincerely desired. There may be a deep longing or longing of some sort, but the kind of concrete, precise, intense desire that we, for example, attach to an object of love. A young man loves a young lady he considers beautiful. That's something concrete. That sense, that quality, that intensity, that precision, that defined nature of desire is irrelevant as far as our desire for eternity is concerned. The second problem here is that the intensity, clarity, and therefore sincerity of our desire with regard to anything, whether it is things terrestrial or things heavenly, is substantially influenced by distance or its opposite, proximity. That is to say, a young man can intensely desire a beautiful woman in his proximity. But suppose he is aware that there is a beautiful woman at a distance of 10,000 kilometers from him. He will still desire her, but the degree, the intensity, and the kind of personal flavor of the desire will be far less as compared to the first instance. So distance modifies desire, and as far as our desire for immortality is concerned, the distance is mind-boggling. We do not know where it is, what circumstances, at what distance, so on and so forth. Everything is shrouded in obscurity and incomprehension. And therefore, it's habitually we say, yes, we are willing to risk our life. We are willing to count our life on this earth as of no consequence, no importance. All we are focused on, all we are living for is eternal life. It's really not true. It's high time we re-examine some of these assumptions. All these exist merely at the level of untested assumptions. And untested assumptions are of no meaning in our life, whether in this life or the life to come, if there is one. So one of the things I really want to do is to request all of us to move from the zone of vague, indeterminate, untested, twilight assumptions to something more of a daylight of considered, understood, assimilated reality, so that we can lead a more honest existence. So, our desire for immortality, our desire for eternal life is not as strong as we think it is or we profess it is. Now, what is the proof for this? The proof is, if you desire something sincerely and intensely, you will do everything about it. For example, if a young man loves a beautiful woman, he has attached his absolute passion to her, he will be willing to risk everything and to overcome every obstacle, brave any danger in order to attain the object of desire. And all his waking moments, all his actions, his reactions, his priorities, everything until the moment of the attainment of the object of desire will be completely focused on this. I doubt if anyone can say that about one's desire for immortal life or life beyond death. It's only a kind of pious hypothesis, and that article of belief, and it's a matter of some doubt whether it's a belief or not. One believes that one believes, that's all. That article of belief, this kind of hypothetical belief, really has no substantial bearing on our life. Whereas, in the case of a young man who intensely desires a young woman of beauty, that one fact impacts, influences, shapes, drives his day-to-day life in a very intense and concentrated manner. I challenge, I doubt if there is anyone who stays so focused on this very, very exalted goal of attaining eternal life while he or she is upon this earth. At least in my life so far, I have not come across such a person, and I have to be honest enough to tell you that I have not lived my life in that manner. I have preached about eternal life, even though I am talking about eternal life, but as for myself, I cannot say that my desire for eternal life is comparable to the desire that a young man, or a young woman for that matter, has for a person of her or his or her desire, who lives in that state of intense absorption in the contemplation of attaining that desired state of life. I hope this much is clear. But if you talk with people, especially those who claim themselves to be religious people, those who profess to be believers, etc., they will create the impression that they count their life in the present, life upon earth, as nothing compared to the prospect of eternal life with God. It's kind of saying. Now, therefore, there is a certain element of hypocrisy about it. If you stop for a moment and ask yourself, if for all your interest in eternal life, you really believe in it, you really feel for it, you really desire it, you'll come to a very, very startling, unnerving realization that you really don't. You really don't. That's a fact. If you did, that one fact will illumine everything about your life in the present. That will become the shaping principle of your life, or the light by which you walk the path of the total life that you lead. And this is not the case with anyone. Now, having said all this, let us address the question, why do people, in spite of what I have considered so far, why do people still say they're focused on or they're desirous of eternal life? Or they're very keen to find out if there is life after death, or if there is this dimension of immortality to human destiny? Or is it the case that the moment we die, we disappear and that's a full stop, beyond which there is nothing? Now, one of the questions that we have to consider here is, what exactly is the soul? Many people have asked me the soul. Everybody agrees that because of death and due to death, the body decays and disappears. So there is no immortality associated with the body. Though in the Christian creed it is repeated week after week, or whenever the creed is repeated, that Christians believe in the resurrection of the body. Now that's an article of belief that Tolstoy roundly rejected. He said it is absolutely stupid and it makes no sense to believe in it. But that is Tolstoy's opinion. We don't have to go by the opinions of others. Each one of us has to seek and find our own articles of faith. And the religious literatures of the world are given to us as the matrix or the field of force within which we can undertake this journey of seeking and finding that which is appropriate to our human quality, our personality, and our sense of our own personal destiny. Now, the difference between the body and the soul is that the body decays, putrefies, disappears, whereas the soul doesn't. But here there are two schools of thought. The scientific school of thought does not believe in the soul. It believes that soul is that phenomenon which is only a part of the body itself and is not separable from it. Suppose that they say that, or they assume that the soul is something like a substance. Now, what is a substance? Substance is the duration of associating certain attributes to something. For example, you have a stone, you have a book, you have a book. Now, this book has substance. That's a set of attributes which can be associated with this object that I am holding for a period of time. Now, suppose I leave the book here and the next day when I take it up, all the attributes of the book that I experience today are seen to have changed completely. Instead of being solid, it's liquid. Instead of capable of being opened, this cannot be opened at all. So, if this goes on, if the attributes keep changing, then we say that it is insubstantial, it has no substance. Now, this also applies to human personality. There are people who go on changing their stance, their opinions. They are like human chameleons that change their colors according to the context. When you try to experience their personality, you feel that there is no substance to their personality. And T.S. Eliot calls such people hollow men. In one of his plays by George Bernard Shaw titled The Arms and the Man, there is a character called character called Major Saranoff. Now, he is a character like this. He has no inner substance, no durable, consistent inner substance. He is what the context is. So, there is a point at which he becomes aware of this, and then he asks himself the question, who am I? Who is this Major Saranoff? Then he says, I see half a dozen Saranoffs popping in and out of me. So who am I? Nothing. There is no substance to my personality. Now, it's a very very deplorable, pathetic condition. Unfortunately, many people are in that state. They are not themselves, they are the context. Put them in any context, they are precisely. Now, such a person, if that person is talking with X, Y, or Z, that this person will be exactly like the person he or she is talking to. There is nothing in this person to which you can appeal, which can be consistent. Most actors are like this, unfortunately. That's one of the major problems that we face when we deal with them. Not everyone, but most actors are of this kind. In fact, it goes for the skill of acting, the capacity not to be oneself, but to be others. Now, the argument in favor of the survival of the soul is that the soul is not made up of different parts. Now, the body putrefies, the body decays because it's made up of different parts. That which is made of a single part does not easily dissolve. But I don't think this is a final argument, because even that which is a single element can disintegrate over a period of time. But it's quite true scientifically that that which is made up of a single element is more durable than that which is made up of several parts. So the body which is made up of several parts at the time of death and after death begins to fall apart. The parts fall apart, and that's called the disintegration of the body. Since the soul is not made up of different varying parts, contrary parts, it cannot disintegrate. This is one argument in favor of the possible immortality of the soul. But then the scientists will always argue that you still have to prove that you have a soul, and the jury is still out on this. If you are pleased to believe that you have a soul, do so by all means. But as far as we are concerned, so far we have not found any evidence to prove or to believe that there is soul and therefore there is life after death. So I just flagged this issue for your continued thought and analysis. Now let's ask the question, why is it that people say, even when they are vague about it, and some of them say with great assertion, with great conviction, passion, assertion, that they believe in life after death? There must be some reasons for it. I'm going to now share with you some of the reasons that have come to my notice. My list may not be exhaustive, but certainly that will give you something to think about. The first reason that first reason why people want to believe in life after death. Wanting to believe is not quite the same as believing. When I say want to believe, why do I choose to put it in that manner? I want to suggest to you that one is forcing oneself to believe, which is not quite the same as spontaneous, natural belief. There's a touch of artificiality about it. The vast majority of people in this world want to believe, persuade themselves to believe that there is life after death, simply because the thought that there is no life after death is completely disagreeable to them, unacceptable to them, shocking to them, traumatic to them. So it is not really interest in life after death that operates here, though the mind plays its own game and makes you think that it is really a sincere interest in life after death. It is not at all the case. In the case of a vast majority of people, it is not at all interest in life after death. It is simply that they find the prospect of everything coming to a complete halt, and they're hitting absolute emptiness via death is unacceptable and disagreeable and traumatic to them. So it is this trauma, this experienced trauma, which is sought to be transcended, or the pain of which is sought to be mitigated in the form of the sort of historically held belief that there is life after death. And certainly that's a hypothesis, that an assumption that enables a person who feels terrified at the prospect of everything disappearing into emptiness at the time of death. So the idea that there is nothing beyond death actually aggravates the terror of death. And in that sense, the idea or the belief that there is life after death helps to mitigate the terror of death, or the terror of dying. So this is one reason why people feel obliged to believe that there is life after death. Now, why I say that this is a contrived feeling, it's because if the feeling, or if this belief in life after death is real, then surely that belief, if sincere, will influence the substance, the quality, the aims and goals of the life that we live here and now. And I leave it to you to decide if our convictions about eternity, or the immortality of the soul, or life after death, influences the quality, the discipline, the value systems, the ideas, the vision of life by which we live today. Highly unlikely that it does. But we go on saying that we believe in life after, because unfortunately there is no emphasis on being true to oneself in situations like this. So this is one thing. The second reason why people believe that there is life after death is a funny one. Everybody else around me thinks that there is life after death, and therefore I also must think likewise. This is what is called the herd instinct, or to use another expression for it, this is called being on the bandwagon of eternal life. And surely you will recognize that there are many on this bandwagon. So if everybody else around me believes that there is life after death, and I don't, then there is something seriously wrong with me. And it's very awkward for me to feel that there is something wrong with me, and even more awkward for me to let others think that there is something wrong with me. This fellow is the odd man out here. Look at him. He doesn't believe in eternal life, and therefore I also belong to eternal life. Do you think this is the case with many people? Well, in terms of the interactions I've had with hundreds of people, I could not but come to this conclusion. Most people claim to believe what they do simply because they do not have the guts to boycott the bandwagon. Pardon me. Everybody else around me believes. Now this sort of people, if they're plucked out of this enclave of believers and planted amidst free thinkers, rationalists and agnostics, they'll immediately disown their belief in life after death. So their belief is not because of our inner conviction, but because of the external context. It's a very interesting phenomenon to engage with. Now, there is a third factor that we need to consider here, and that is, there is a worldly motive for people to propagate this faith or this belief in eternal life. And this is mostly in the case of rulers and the ruling elite. You would see that in the past, kings were ardent believers. They were also propagators of religion. And the ruling elite in almost every society will also be far right in religion. The far right in economics will also be the far right in religion. The far right in political power also will be the far right in religion. Why? There's a reason for it. propagating belief in life after death is the best strategy for controlling the thinking, the behavior of the less fortunate in their midst regarding the deprivations in which their life is languishing. Now, if you remove that expectation of life after death, the possibility of people becoming very restless and rebellious about the most unbearable levels of destitution in which they have to live, the squalor, the misery, the deprivation, will not be acceptable to them. What will enable them to endure this miserable state is the prospect of being compensated, not in this world, but in some other world. So the ruling elite, the socio-economic elite, will be very keen and very happy, will be at the forefront of propagating the idea that there is life after death, and all of you will be kings and aristocrats. You will have mansions and mansions, and you'll be walking on roads paved with gold. What more do you want? But the funny thing is that the people who are busy propagating it, they will not believe. A survey was conducted in the United States by the Pew Foundation. A very massive survey was conducted to find out what are the patterns of belief among people. And the findings of the survey reveal that bishops and priests are far backward than ordinary people in believing the articles of faith that they make people repeat in the form of the creed. As I pointed it out in one of my earlier videos, among the Jews, the aristocratic group in the religious context were the Sadducees, compared to the Pharisees, who came from the middle class, lower middle class. The Sadducees came from the comparatively more aristocratic background. And the main distinction between the Sadducees and the Pharisees was that the Pharisees believed in life after death, whereas the Sadducees, the more affluent among the priests, they did not believe in life after death. Instances can be multiplied. So there is a politics to the belief in life after death, the politics of manipulation, so that the frustration that people feel on account of being kept in a state of chronic deprivation does not erupt like a volcano into unmanageable states of rebellion, and that people can be made to endure any extent of privation by holding out before them the prospect of being compensated in a life in a state beyond death. Now, all that I have said is not meant to prove that there is no life after death. I am only examining, from an academic point of view, the facts in this field. Now, what I want to say, and I am going to conclude my thinking, what I want to say is this. There are certain articles of belief that can never be proved. In fact, if you look at it philosophically, something becomes a matter of belief only because it cannot be proved. That which lends itself to the laboratory procedure of testing, examination of data, verification, etc., that doesn't have to become an article of faith. It belongs to a domain of knowledge. This is a distinction that the Dutch philosopher Soren Kierkegaard makes. He says, don't expect from religion any proof or certitude. Religion is a domain, as he says, and I'm quoting his words, of inner assurance, not of proof. So, everything that we encounter in this domain, if at all you want to deal with it, must be accepted or dealt with only within the discipline of, not of scientific proof or disproof, but of an inner assurance. Then Kierkegaard goes on to say, and I fully agree with him, that whatever constitutes a substance of inner assurance, or I hold an inner assurance that there is eternal life. Okay? You cannot prove it or disprove it. I cannot prove it or disprove it to you. But I have the freedom to entertain the belief that there is for me eternal life. There may not be eternal life for you because you are absolutely keen to believe there is no eternal life for you. That's fine, fair enough. I have no quarrel with you. But why should you quarrel with me if I say that I believe there is a dimension of eternity and immortality to my life? My life cannot just disappear like this. I am not a dry leaf to be blown away by the wind, to be seen nowhere thereafter. I have lived a meaningful life, and therefore death cannot be the end of that beautiful experience of mine. I strongly and ardently believe it. I have a right to do so. But there is a twist in the tale. That is, while whatever I hold or whatever you hold can be legitimized or accepted at the level of inner assurance, I'm using Kierkegaard's two words, beautiful words, very meaningful words. You cannot substitute these words with anything else. Inner assurance as against external proof. While I am legitimate, I have every right to harbor these inner assurances, the twist in the tale is that I have to act upon these inner assurances and authenticate the truth of these inner assurances by the life I lead. Now, suppose I say that I believe in eternal life and live in a manner that has nothing whatsoever to do with that article of faith, then it is not an article of belief but of mere hypocrisy. On the other hand, I believe that there is an immortal dimension to my soul, or my personality for that matter, and that this dimension will continue beyond the limitation of death, and I make that article of belief the shaping principle for my life upon this earth here for as long as I live. Then through the quality, variety of experiences, the stands I take, the choices I make, the priorities I entertain, the way I relate or not relate to the world, etc., the sum total of my life will be the authentication or the verification, the proof of the reality of that other world. So if there is a proof that there is life after death, that proof can only be the believer, but the believer can himself be a contradiction to that idea if in his life he does not leave a margin for that particular article of belief. The believer can be also a powerful witness to that reality if he lives in such a manner that that article of belief is the foremost shaping principle of his life upon this earth. So you can actually witness eternal life through your life within time and space, your life upon this earth, provided you accept that as the shaping principle of your life here and now. That's where I stand as far as this vexing question is concerned. Now, as I said, this is only the preliminary step that we have taken. We have a long way to go, and in course of time, we'll be able to think more and more and attain greater clarity on this very daunting, complex, mysterious subject. Thank you. All the very best.